you have 15 minutes, Deputy Donnelly.
That's right, Chair. I'm sharing them with
You're
Deputy
sharing
Ryan.
with Deputy Ryan for 15 minutes.
Minister, last week in the Chamber when we spoke on Brexit, I stated that the decision of the people of the UK to leave the European Union is bad for the UK, it's bad for Ireland, and it's bad for the European Union. In the UK, we see that their economy is already showing the signs of some damage. And also, we've now seen warnings from their government that they will look to reduce public spending on public services. So they're already beginning to see some economic turbulence, and obviously if they disinvest in public services, they're going to see social damage as well. In Ireland too, we've already started to see some economic damage. Billions in value were wiped off companies listed on the ISEC, €10 billion approximately in the first day after Brexit. And 40% of trade between indigenous Irish companies and the world is between Ireland and the UK. So 40%, 2 in every €5 that Irish companies trade globally is traded with the UK. We also know that UK tourists account for about 1/4 of all spend by foreign visitors to Ireland. 1/4. Last year, 3.5 million trips were made to Ireland by UK citizens. So the fall in sterling, which we've already seen, which is likely to continue, the volatility in sterling, which is likely to continue, and the general rise of uncertainty globally to do with the UK, within the UK itself, and also in Ireland when it comes to the UK. That rise of uncertainty, that fall in sterling, that increase in volatility, they're not only likely to start affecting Irish businesses very quickly, they're likely to hit tourism in Ireland this summer, almost straight away. Now, Minister, while there's been a lot of talk about the damage to the UK, the potential damage to Ireland, there hasn't been very much talk about the damage to the European Union itself. It's as if the European Union and the European project are somehow divorced from the UK's decision to leave. Now, the European project is important. I consider myself a proud European. The European project has helped secure decades of peace in Europe. And we lead the way globally in areas including human rights, international development and climate change. So the European project must succeed. But the European project is losing its way. Now, during the banking crisis, the institutions of Europe hung Ireland out to dry. Threats were made to our economy by the ECB. We know Trichet talked about a bomb going off in Dublin. And at every stage of the Troika programme, Minister, at every single stage, Ireland had either the worst or the joint worst deal when it came to borrowing terms, interest rates and so forth. So when Ireland needed solidarity, we were treated very badly. There's also a growing democratic deficit in the European Union. Back in 2004, we saw the fiasco of the so-called European Constitution. The people of France said no to it, the people of the Netherlands said no to it, so they changed the name of it and said, well, it's no longer a constitution, it's a treaty, so your vote doesn't matter anymore. We were obviously asked to vote on it twice. During the economic crisis, we saw Germany move further and further and further into the centre in terms of calling the shots in the Eurozone, when it came to Ireland, when it came to Greece, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and so forth. And more recently, we have seen a small number of the large companies, including France and Germany, become more and more central to European policy. The day after Brexit, we saw the 6 founding members come together, have a press release, have a photo call, and essentially speak, as far as they were concerned, with the voice of the European Union about what was happening with the UK. The European Union is undoubtedly poorer without the people of the United Kingdom in it. And if lessons are not learned, the European Union is likely to find itself not just without the UK, but potentially without other members as well. We're now seeing calls in France, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Greece, in Sweden, and in other EU countries to hold referendums similar to what the UK have just gone through. Now, Brexit was partly about immigration, but really it was about a disconnect between the European project and the people of the UK, who were European citizens. And this disconnect, Minister, this sense of disempowerment can be seen all over the place. We see it in the rise of ultranationalism. We see Golden Dawn in Greece. We see the Alternative for Deutschland party in Germany. We see the National Front in France, the True Finn party in Finland, the Freedom Party in Austria. These are all on the rise. They're all on the rise. And they're on the rise because the European project is not bringing all of its citizens along. It is becoming more and more a project for special interests, a project for the haves rather than the have-nots. And that, more than anything, that disconnect, that democratic deficit, is what led people who feel disempowered in the UK to vote to leave the European Union. Now, the Taoiseach referred to regret. He said when he was at the Council meeting, there was a sense of regret amongst the heads of state of the European Union members. But, Minister, I would put it to you that regret is irrelevant. What's needed is reflection followed by action. And I have here, Minister, the 6-page statement coming out of the EU Council. It covers immigration, it covers border controls, it covers a lot of different things. The final item on it, Minister, item 9, is outcome of the UK referendum. And in a 6-page document, the only thing that the European Council has to say about the outcome of the UK referendum is this. The UK Prime Minister informed the European Council about the outcome of the referendum in the UK. Now, there was nothing in there about lessons that have been learned or need to be learned. There's nothing about a period of reflection. There's nothing about the rise of ultranationalism in the European Union. So what's needed is a clear understanding of how the European Union needs to learn the lessons and follow a model that is inclusive both socially and economically. The Taoiseach stated that Brexit highlighted a crisis of confidence in the EU and in politics and institutions around the world, and I agree with him. I think he is absolutely right. And so I would say to you, Minister, I would say to the Taoiseach, I say to the government and indeed to Dáil Éireann, then let's act accordingly. If we recognise that Brexit is the result of a crisis of confidence in the EU and political institutions globally, then let's build confidence in the EU and political institutions globally. Let's commit to no more regressive budgets. Let's commit to no more tax cuts and commit to investing instead in indigenous business and in giving every child the opportunity to achieve their potential. Let's commit to calling out the lack of transparency and special interests that appear to be involved in TTIP. The Minister, obviously Ireland has limited influence when it comes to the European Union. We are one of 28 members, we are a small member. But we can act in a manner that demonstrates how to rebuild confidence. So why don't we change our economic policy? Why don't we change our social policy to demonstrate that it is not economic strength or a decent society? That it is not economic strength and a decent society, but that economic strength and a decent society make each other stronger. So why don't we change our approach and build a republic that demonstrates the advantages of economic strength, the advantages of a decent society, and show how a more globalised world can benefit all citizens and not just the few. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Now, Deputy Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, Minister. In the EU Council statement that came out, item 11, paragraph 7, states that the European Council today adopted an agenda calling for swift and determined progress to create the right conditions for stimulating new business opportunities by ensuring very high capacity fixed and wireless broadband connectivity across Europe, which is a precondition for future competitiveness. Can I ask, Minister, the Cabinet made a decision yesterday, a very bad decision, or today, I beg your pardon, a very bad decision in my opinion, to privatise the future national broadband network. Can I ask, at the EU Council meeting, or indeed indeed in your conversations, has there been any pressure brought to bear on Ireland to make a decision to privatise the network rather than keeping it in public ownership, obviously as a strategic asset should be? Secondly, Chair, can I ask the Minister very quickly, in your conversations with the foreign ministers with regard to Brexit, is there an acceptance, Minister, that Ireland may very well need our own bilateral agreements with the UK, which may supersede and go further than general UK-EU negotiations post Article 50? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you for your brevity. Minister.
Thank you. In relation to the issue of the broadband, the national strategy, or indeed international engagement on this issue, this is something coherent that hasn't been featuring in the context of my engagement at EU level. The Cabinet did take a decision today following a number of options to proceed by way of the national plan. I'm sure the Dáil will have an opportunity of discussing this at an early date. I have no knowledge of any European influence or European engagement on this decision. But you'll forgive me, Cathaoirleach, if I defer to my colleague, the Minister for Communications, on this issue. And I understand that provision is being made for an early debate on this issue, and I'm sure he'll have an opportunity by way of question time as well. In relation to the second issue and the matter of the Foreign Affairs Council, we haven't at Council level as yet had an opportunity to discuss the issue of the referendum vote in the United Kingdom. Our next meeting is scheduled for next Monday week in Brussels. My assumption is, not having seen the agenda, my assumption is that the issue will feature. But in the meantime, in the context of my own bilateral engagement with foreign ministers, and indeed I know from speaking to the Taoiseach on the matter of his engagement with European heads of state and government, Ireland's priorities are being clearly set out, one of which is the matter of our long-standing relationship and engagement with the United Kingdom through the common travel area. I believe it's important that this forms a priority in terms of the ultimate settlement negotiations with the United Kingdom, and also, of course, the issue of the border, as implied earlier by Deputy Ahi. These are really important strategic national issues for us, and we will continue to highlight them at every opportunity prior to the negotiations and ultimately in the course of the negotiations. In the meantime, we wish to impress upon our colleagues the core nature of these issues and the unique status of the island of Ireland in the context of the European Union, with particular reference to the peace process.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Eamon Ryan.